Hello. Recently, the world has been struggling with the pandemic of COVID-19, creating concerns and questions about the eminence of God. I'm Majidula, and you're watching The Ignite Show. Today, we discuss the question, is God great? Let us know where you're watching us from to engage in our conversation. Comment down below. Like, share, and subscribe.
Subscribe to this channel. Like, comment, and share.
Our guest today is Barbe Gambo. Karibu sana. COVID-19 is here. What do you think? Is God's silence on this issue?
Silence is a very powerful word. Actually, Webster Dictionary defines silence as a non-verbal way of doing things, meaning you're not speaking, but at the background you're doing something. Every human being goes through two things. Number one, consolation. Consolation is a period whereby a person experiences God's peace, love, and grace. But on the other side, desolation means in times of tribulation, afflictions, and pain. It's a moment where you feel like God is a distance from where you are. In a point whereby you feel like you are left alone, you're thinking like God is not saying something about your situation. One of the most powerful definitions of silence given by Mother Teresa is this. He says, we need to find God, and we cannot find God in noise and restlessness. God is the friend of silence. See how nature, trees, flowers, grass grows in silence. See the stars, the moon, and the sun, how they move in silence. We need silence to be able to touch souls. And every time God is silent, three things are involved. One, God is silent because we are undergoing a transition. Every time God is silent, remember, He's moving you from one level to another. He's moving you from one class to another. A parable of a teacher and the student is given, whereby the whole semester the teacher imparts knowledge into the student. But at the end, during the exam, the teacher sits back and looks at how the students react to the papers. That is how silence works. In the same way how God works with silence. Number two, every time we experience silence, we need to understand that it's a wake-up call from God. Every time there is silence and every time you're feeling like you're desolate in your life, God is trying to trigger you to wake up. Are you not praying? Are you not reading the word? Are you experiencing things that are not clearly bringing you close to God? God will trigger you to be able to wake up and even seek Him deeper. Every time there is silence, silence triggers depth. We need to go deeper into God. And number three, every time we experience silence, remember, it's a prophecy being fulfilled. A prophecy that was given earlier, a prophecy that was spoken by people that have been called by God. It's a time when prophecy is being fulfilled.
What's your take on the projections of believers' faith now and after the pandemic?
The projection of believers' faith. Once upon a time in an animal kingdom, a lion woke up once morning and made a prayer to God and said, "Dear God, I am leaving my house and I'm going outside to hunt. I pray that you may give me something to eat." On the other hand, the antelope woke up and made a prayer and said, "Dear God, I am praying. I am going out to look for something to eat. But I make one prayer, that I will not be somebody's meal today." Which one of the two do you think God answered the question? I would like to say both of them made a prayer, and I'm 100% sure that both of them, God answered their prayer. You asked what is the projection of believers' faith during and after this pandemic. Every time there is a crisis, there is a response. So everybody responded once the COVID-19 was announced. Others responded by going into their houses and fasting and praying. Others responded by gathering together their tools and going into the experiment labs to find a vaccine to be able to cut out this pandemic. But one of the most important things that I would like to say is that it is very, very dangerous if you do not respond when there is a crisis. Because every time there is a crisis, there must be a response. So everybody will respond. Or in other words, there would be a projection of believers' faith immediately after the pandemic, depending on how they responded during the pandemic. If they responded by going deep into prayer, their faith would be uplifted. Those that believed so much into experiments and science, the same way, their belief in the science will be also be increased after the pandemic.
Has science failed in saving humanity?
This particular question, I need to be extremely careful, because if I just answer it from a perspective of a believer, I'll be able to be discriminated by those scientists who believe in science. But I would not like to despise some of the energy that has been put in place. During this crisis, we've been able to have tremendous discoveries, and one of them is our own from Kenyatta University. We've been able to discover ventilators. The other one is we've been able to upgrade skills. We've been having companies like Rivertex, and most of them being able to come up with skills of developing masks for our people. So I would not like to discriminate science, but I would like to say this. Everybody that started science, most of them were believers. Most of the scientists were believers. If I would like just to mention a few, one of them is Newton, the other one is Pascal, we have Boyle, we have Clerk Maxwell. These people that started science, most of them are believers, people that trusted in God. And this will not be a question of whether science has failed over believing in God. It should be a question of, do we have integration between science and believing in God? Do we have scientists that would come up with things that God has showed them in vision? Do we have people that God can communicate to who are scientists, and God gives them ideas of how to develop things that will solve humanity problem? So this will not be a question of whether science has failed and whether believers have failed and one has been able to override the other. It should be a question of, do we have an integration point of where we have scientists who have believed in God and God giving them solution, maybe through dreams and visions, and be able to come up with a solution in this pandemic time that we are going through. So that's how I would like to answer that question.
Is God great?
What do you mean when you say, is God great?
I mean, do we have parameters that describe God's greatness? For example, the COVID-19, does it show how God's greatness is?
One day a man walked out of his house and stood aside and looked at the house and said, "Wow, God is great." He looked at his beautiful family and his wife and how beautiful they were, smiling and even having a good time at the moment, and he said, "Wow, God is great." Another man looked at his built business and said, "God is great." Another looked at his cruise ship and said, "Wow, God is great." Then if it is a question of defining God depending on the things that we have acquired, then I think at this point, God is not great. God cannot be defined with things. God cannot be defined with materials. God cannot be defined with what has satisfied our soul. God is beyond building a house. God is beyond having a happy family. God is beyond having a cruise ship. God is beyond physical things. God will always be great. God is always great. God will forever be great. It doesn't matter whether you acquire things, whether you have things at your hands, it always remains to be God is great all the time. Whether you're having a good time, whether you're having a happy moment, whether you're having a discouraging moment, whether you're facing affliction or pain, God will always remain to be great.
ABC News, Ghana and Nigeria's ABN TV headline claimed that two French doctors, Camille Rocher, head of research at the INSAM Health Research Group, and Jean-Paul Mira, head of intensive care of Cochin Hospital in Paris, made a statement in a TV debate that COVID-19 vaccine should be tested in Africa. What's your take on that?
I would like first to congratulate one of us, the Director General of World Health Organization, Dr. Tewodros, who said, "We cannot test the vaccine in Africa. It will not, and it shall not happen." I would like to speak to Africans across the entire continent and tell them this. It is time for Africa to wake up. This is the time for revolution. Prophecies have come of how Africa will lead the entire world, and it is time. This is the time for Africa to wake up. This is the time. I expected so much from Africans during this pandemic. Like I was expecting Africans to gather all the resources they had, bring the foods, the fresh fruits. We produce cabbages, we produce spinach, we produce onions, we produce so many things in terms of food. I was thinking of Africa sending an entire ship of food to the Europeans to be able to show them that Africans, we are awake and we are about to form the United Kingdom of Africa. Let me say this. Every parent should teach their children self-dependence. One thing that Africans lack is self-dependence, self-reliance, self-belief. We need to believe in ourselves. There are things we can do without our colonial masters. There are things we can change without our colonial masters. Let us build our own industries. Let's build our own businesses that will be able to generate income for our children. We'll be able to create employments for our children in Africa that will be able to produce cars. We can be able to manufacture phones. We have the talent, we have the skills, we have the resources. We can be able to come up together as a continent and join our resources together and be able to bring something out of it. Africa, it is time.
On to our final questions. Do you have any encouragement you have for our viewers at this moment?
I believe it's a very trying moment for humanity. This disease does not choose whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, whether your skin color, your height, your weight. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't discriminate whether you are old or young. In a trying moment where, as humans, we need to come up together, join our hands together, and fight against this deadly pandemic. I'd like to encourage everybody across the world. We shall overcome. We shall be able to pass through this. We shall come out victorious. We shall come up as winners. I know some of us, we have already lost our moms, we have lost our fathers, we have lost our children in this pandemic. But I would like to encourage you that we shall overcome. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. There is always a rainbow after a storm. There is always celebration after the thunder. We shall overcome. I'd like us to put our faith together. Those can be able to pray, let them pray. Those God has anointed for the work of experiments, let them go back to the experiments and find a vaccine. We shall overcome. God is on our side. We shall overcome.